Hey guys, tonight we begin with bones washed by ancient waves and whispers from beneath the sea. You're standing barefoot on the shoreline of prehistoric Japan. No cruise ships, no ramen shops, just salt wind and the looming shadow of something circling in the shallows. The waves seem unusually choppy, and the air smells metallic. Blood? No, just your nerves. You crouch near a rocky outcrop, holding a line made of twisted plant fibers. You're fishing, not for fun, for survival. And you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't hear the splash. What you feel first is the tug. Not gentle, violent, sudden. You're yanked forward. Your left leg disappears into the ocean. The pain is white-hot, blinding. The water turns pink, then crimson, then black. 3,000 years later, your body, what's left of it, is unearthed by archaeologists in Tsukumo, Japan. They call you Suomo 24, a name as sterile as the lab where your bones now lie. But your death? Anything but sterile. You bear 790 separate wounds. Historians still argue whether the attacker was a tiger shark or a great white. Either way, it wasn't kind. Your leg was torn off. Your hand, gone. Jagged slashes down your ribs, your pelvis, your spine. And yet, some wounds overlap. They say you may have thrashed, rolled, maybe even fought back. You didn't drown. You bled out. Fast. Forensic specialists call it the oldest known shark attack in human history. A brutal battle between soft flesh and serrated tooth. Mainstream sources often credit this find as proof that humanity's relationship with the sea has always teetered between awe and terror. But here's the strange thing. Your burial was respectful. Laid to rest in a proper grave. Arm folded over chest. Were your kin watching from the shore when it happened? Did they hear the screams? You can almost picture it. The stunned silence after the splashing stopped. A child crying. A grandfather muttering that the spirits were angry. Or worse, knowing the sea took another, and that it would take again. Even stranger, shark attacks were likely more common than records suggest. Japan's coastal settlements depended on fishing. And tiger sharks, known for their curiosity and appetites, aren't exactly new neighbors. Your death just happened to leave enough marks, clean enough bones, and just enough mystery to survive millennia. The details are so precise, it's uncomfortable. One arm covered in cuts, the other untouched. Some theorize you may have been turning, trying to shield yourself, trying to keep a dominant arm free to strike. It didn't help. Shark teeth left no tool marks, no signs of human intervention. This wasn't murder, but it also wasn't peace. You died feeding something that has never heard a human name. In modern terms, it's tempting to romanticize the ocean. But tonight, under this dim light and soft hum, let's imagine it the way you saw it, full of teeth and secrets and hunger. The sea has always been a place of forgetting, of dragging things under. But your bones refused to vanish. They emerged with a message, carved in silent lines across your frame. You were here. You suffered. You fought. And then you were gone. And in a way, you're still fighting. Not against sharks now, but against time, erosion, and forgetfulness. Each nick in your bone is a syllable in a story we're still trying to translate. Historians still debate whether your death changed anything for your village. Did they fear the water more afterward? Did they perform rituals, offer grain, move inland? Or did they fish the same spot the next day, mouths tight, pretending not to look at the bloodstains on the rocks? The fringe theory says you were bait, that maybe you were cast out intentionally, a sacrifice to placate the angry sea. No proof, no evidence, just an eerie pattern of similar coastal deaths around the same era. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter how you died. What matters is that you remind us we've never been invincible. Not then, not now. Survival is not a birthright. It's a negotiation. And sometimes the sea doesn't sign. Your story doesn't end with your wounds. It ends tonight, here, with your bones gently described, your pain folded into the soft rhythm of sleep. You've fought long enough. Rest, Suomo 24. You shift now from the surf to something thicker, darker. The air is heavier. Not with salt this time, but with tar. You're standing near what will someday be Los Angeles. But right now, it's nothing but swampland and bubbling black pools that smell like rot and thunder. The Brea tar pits. Before movie sets, before coffee shops, before street names like Sunset and Vine, there were just animals. And you. You hear a quiet plop. Something just sank. Maybe a bird. Maybe a wolf. You squint. And there, just beyond a cracked cypress root, you see her. She's face down, her hair matted in sticky threads, her body awkwardly bent. Her skull, when found thousands of years later, will show a single brutal impact, fractured from behind. Not from falling, from force. Human force. Archaeologists call her the Brea woman. Discovered in 1914, her bones are the oldest human remains ever pulled from these pits. But the way she died? That's the mystery. The official records quietly noted cranial depression, a fancy term for someone caved her skull in. Mainstream theories once dismissed it as a fall. But newer analysis? They're not so sure. You imagine the moment. Maybe she ran. Maybe she screamed. Maybe she knew the attacker. That blow, it came from someone behind her, maybe a jealous lover, a clan dispute. Maybe she saw something she shouldn't have. Maybe she was the warning. And what a place to hide a body. Brea isn't just tar. It's a trap. It lures with stillness. Animals would step in, sink, and flail. Predators would come for the struggling prey, then become stuck themselves. Wolves, saber-tooths, mammoths, all tangled in ancient black glue. And eventually, this woman joined them. Not dragged, not thrown. She sank slowly. The tar doesn't devour. It embalms, preserves. And so she waited. Thousands of years later, scientists debated whether she was buried intentionally or merely unlucky. Some fringe archaeologists whisper she was a human sacrifice. But that theory got swept away. Politics, preservation debates, museum funding. The real story, it seems, is still stuck in the goo. What isn't debated is her age, roughly 9,000 years old. Her body was found with a small dog nearby, also preserved. A companion or coincidence? Her skull now sits under glass. Cleaned, labeled, quiet. But if you lean in close, right here, now, you can still imagine her final moment. That split second of confusion. The crack, the tar closing around her fingers as she tries to claw free. The scent of pine and blood and bitumen. And the silence that followed. She's a ghost with no story. A data point with no narrative. But lying in that sticky deathbed, she holds something more powerful than any name. She holds a warning that even in a time of mammoths and megafauna, the greatest threat was still other humans. It's funny how we always think danger wore claws. Sometimes it wore sandals. Historians still argue whether she was the victim of random violence or part of something larger. Social punishment, exile, ritual. Some even suggest the tar pits were considered sacred spaces, a boundary between worlds. If that's true, she didn't just fall in. She was sent. Tonight, as you drift deeper into this ancient darkness, imagine what it's like to vanish without a trace. No headlines, no grieving friends, just one last breath, held in silence, while the earth swallows you slow. And yet, she's remembered. That broken skull, once lost in tar, became a signal across centuries. There's a quiet kind of power in that. The tar fades now, the air lightens, but not in a way that feels comforting. It's colder, drier. You find yourself in Neolithic France, about 5,100 years ago. The landscape is farmland now, but the soil still smells of fire and sweat. Villagers here cling to life through grain, goats, and rituals too old for memory. The villagers are gathering. You can hear chanting, not loud, not theatrical. It's quiet, focused. 3 women kneel in the dirt, their necks bound with twine, ankles tied. Their faces are unreadable, calm, frightened, resigned. It's hard to tell. This is not a punishment. It's a harvest offering. Across a field near the Marne River, archaeologists would one day uncover the pit where they were buried. Not tossed, placed, curled as if sleeping, but with cords still looped around their limbs. They were buried alive, a communal death, for communal gain. You watch now as the soil is poured slowly over their backs, shoulders, heads. They don't struggle, not because they don't want to, but because they can't. Their arms are pinned, their faces pressed to the earth. No cries, just the soft compression of breathless silence. This was the Neolithic answer to drought, blight, misfortune. When the rain didn't come, blood did. It wasn't an act of hate. That's the part that lingers. It was necessity, cloaked in belief. Sacrifice to the spirits of soil and sky. These weren't criminals. In some ways they were honored, chosen. But death didn't care how sacred your reason was. It still came slowly. Modern excavations show no defensive wounds, no trauma, no blades, just the bindings, the awkward positioning, and the absence of air. Historians still argue whether these women volunteered, or were volunteered. The community may have seen it as a duty, a privilege even. A fringe theory posits the women were outsiders. Captives brought in precisely for this role. Sacrifice without consequence. But their skeletal features match local populations. Their dental wear suggests village diets. One had signs of chronic arthritis. These weren't strangers. They were neighbors. You wonder what the last sensation was. The dirt tightening around their chest, the muffled sound of drums above, the warm press of another person's shoulder beside them, also fading. And then, nothing. We often picture ancient sacrifice as dramatic. Fire, chanting, daggers. But this was slow, almost bureaucratic. Like digging a trench and knowing it was your final task before becoming part of it. They likely knew the date for days. Perhaps there was a final meal, a ritual bath, maybe even a goodbye from family. Maybe someone wept as the cords were tied, then turned away before the pit closed. Or maybe they celebrated. Maybe death for the harvest was an honor they craved more than breath. We'll never know, but the earth remembers. You can still see the soil layers compressed tightly around their ribs. Archaeologists marked the weight of each stratum. You can read their burial like pages in a slow book. We don't know their names, but we know this. They were placed intentionally. Not one, not two, but three. Triads appear again and again in ancient belief. 3 faces of the goddess, 3 seasons, 3 moons. Coincidence? Historians debate it. But myth has always favored symmetry. And tonight, under the soft drone of your fan, you remember them. Not as victims, not even as heroines, just as people. People who knelt in a field at dawn, surrounded by faces they knew, and slowly disappeared beneath the grain they died to protect. The harvest came, eventually, and maybe the rains. But the cost? 3 breaths that didn't make it past sunrise. You leave the fields of France behind now, but the scent of soil clings to you. And in your mind, the image shifts. Grain fields fade into tall reeds by a slow river. You're standing at the banks of the Brea settlement in what is now Spain, around 2200 BCE. You hear the soft lapping of water, the buzz of insects, the distant murmur of voices. It's the kind of day that makes everything feel ordinary, until it isn't. You see the boy first, maybe 12, maybe younger. He doesn't look afraid. He's still holding a sling stone, mid-throw, but his body is frozen, twisted in a final moment of defiance or disbelief. He never saw the second wave coming. Archaeologists uncovered the massacre site near the village of Hoya, a place once bustling with trade and copper tools, now marked by death. Bodies everywhere, men, women, children. No time to flee, no one spared. But it's the boy that stops you. He was hit by 64 separate arrows, not figuratively, literally. His small frame bristles with them like a hunted animal. Arrows to the back, legs, ribs, skull, and some were fired after he fell. A frenzy? A warning? Or just overkill? Historians still argue whether this was a raid gone wrong or a calculated extermination. But here's the kicker. No valuables were looted. Pottery remained. Livestock was untouched. Even tools were left behind. This wasn't conquest. It was annihilation. There are signs the attackers circled the village from both sides, blocking escape routes. Some victims have defensive wounds. Others were shot in the back. The fringe theory? It was a ritual cleansing. Wipe the land of a rival bloodline. Not just defeat, but deletion. And this child? He didn't just die. He was displayed, buried where he fell, face down, arms splayed, a warning without words. You look closer. His bones are thin. Growth lines show periods of starvation. He wasn't a warrior. He was barely surviving. And yet he stood. Fought. Or at least tried to. We sometimes forget children were part of every era's horror. Not spared. Not hidden. Just smaller targets. The mainstream explanation says it was political. An enemy tribe flexing power. But the trauma suggests something more intimate. These arrows weren't from a distance. Some were driven in from just a few feet away. Someone looked this boy in the eye and still pulled the string. It's easy to feel numb in the face of numbers. Dozens dead. Hundreds of wounds. But tonight, let the numbers soften. Let them become one boy in one moment beneath one sky. He didn't expect mercy, but he probably didn't expect this. And you? You're standing in that same spot now. The sun has lowered, the reeds rustle softly, and the river keeps flowing. Indifferent. Quiet. Like it's seen too much to care. The boy's arrows were made of flint, carefully carved. Some even had colored tips, pigment-stained to mark the kill. A hunter's pride, or a signature? Historians disagree. Some think the pigments indicate different warriors. Others believe it was ceremonial, offering the body to the earth in rainbow death. In any case, the arrows outlasted the grief. We have no records, no names, no vengeance, just bones stacked with meaning we're still unpacking. And that sling stone in his hand, still there, never thrown. Maybe that's the worst part. Maybe he believed he'd have time. Tonight, under your blanket and blinking ceiling light, try to imagine it. The soft thud of hooves, the rush of feet, the tension in the air when the sky fills with arrows not meant for the sky at all. The boy falls, and the village falls with him. Not from disease, not from nature, but from us. Now drift with me into the humid breath of the jungle. It's thick here. Every leaf glistens with mist, and the air presses in like a wet cloth. You're in Mesoamerica, standing before the towering face of a Mayan temple. The steps rise steeply, carved with glyphs you can't read but somehow feel. You hear drums, flutes, a steady rhythm that pulses beneath your feet. Someone is falling. At first it looks like flight. A slow, ragged descent from the top of the pyramid. But then you realize he's tumbling, head over heels, a blur of crimson and bone. He hits the stone below, doesn't move. This skeleton, found decades ago at the base of a temple in the city of Copan, has haunted researchers ever since. Was he a priest? A prisoner? A royal? The injuries tell a story. Shattered pelvis, crushed ribs, skull fractured in 3 places. The fall didn't kill him cleanly. It mangled. Historians still debate whether he was pushed, slipped, or leapt willingly. A ritual sacrifice thrown from the temple summit to please the gods? Or a man trying to escape something even worse at the top? There's no conclusive answer. But his bones don't lie. They shattered unevenly, suggesting he twisted mid-air, tried to brace, maybe even screamed. The impact broke his right arm, not his left. Perhaps he reached out in one last, futile attempt to catch the edge. Modern recreations estimate he fell nearly 30 meters. That's 10 stories. Imagine the air rushing past, the sacred carving spinning in your vision, the earth rushing up like a fist. And here's the unsettling twist. The Mayans believed in ritual death as renewal. Blood, breath, and bone were offerings. Sacred currency. Temples weren't just places of prayer. They were stages for transition, from life into meaning. Fringe researchers argue the man might have been a willing sacrifice, chosen, prepared, dressed in ceremonial cloth, given hallucinogens to ease the terror. But others insist the placement of the body, slumped, awkward, unclean, suggests haste. Maybe he wasn't meant to fall. Maybe he jumped. Or maybe someone made sure he did. We often imagine temples as places of peace, meditation, enlightenment. But here, under this dark sky, they were monuments to blood. You didn't always walk down. Sometimes you flew. The glyphs on the wall depict jaguars, serpents, hearts held aloft like trophies. And beneath those images, hundreds of bones have been found. Young, old, male, female, all victims, or celebrants, or both. You sit now on a stone ledge, watching the jungle reclaim the ruin. Vines crawl over the steps. Insects hum around your ears. You could almost forget the man who fell. Almost. But he's still here. His skeleton now lies in a museum. Cleaned, posed, labeled Subject A14. But that doesn't erase the story. It just hides it in climate control. You picture the last thing he saw. The clouds, the faces above him, or just the hard, unblinking stare of a god carved in obsidian. He probably didn't have time to wonder what came next. But tonight, we do. Historians still debate whether temple sacrifices were spiritual or political. A public spectacle to reinforce fear, or an honest belief in feeding the sun with souls? Maybe both. The Mayan world rarely gave answers, just symbols, just stories. And in those stories, falling meant rising, if you were lucky. Tonight, as your breathing slows and your room softens, remember the man who fell. Not just his end, but the ritual behind it. The way we've always tried to give death meaning, to make it beautiful, sacred, necessary, even when it broke every bone. From jungle canopy to volcanic ash, now you're standing on a shoreline frozen in time, not by snow, not by ice, but by fire. You're in Herculaneum, 79 CE, just down the coast from Pompeii, but without the tourism. Fewer frescoes, less drama, and yet more silence, more horror. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius was not a single fiery boom. It was waves of destruction, and Herculaneum got one of the worst. You step through the narrow stone streets. The sky above is already a bruised black, but you're not alone. In a row of boathouses along the ancient beach, over 300 people huddle in fear. Mothers clutching children, men gripping satchels, dogs pawing at the walls. And then, it comes. Not lava, not ash, but a pyroclastic surge, a cloud of superheated gas moving at 100 kilometers per hour. Imagine a hurricane made of fire. One breath and your lungs are seared. One blink and your eyes boil. In less than a second, your soft tissue vaporizes. What's left behind are skeletons, perfectly preserved. Some curled in fetal position, others frozen mid-sprint, and some caught trying to shield the ones they loved. Mainstream historians long believed Pompeii had the more tragic fate, smothered in ash, buried in time. But Herculaneum's story is darker. These people didn't suffocate. They boiled alive. Their bones show signs of thermal shock. brain cases exploded from the steam pressure. Even their skulls, glassy blackened domes, sometimes show residue of crystallized brain tissue. That's how hot it got. Over 500 degrees. Hot enough to flash evaporate blood. Fringe researchers once claimed some of the bodies were decapitated by the blast force. Later studies softened that theory, but confirmed violent internal damage. You didn't just die. You were undone. One woman's skeleton was found clutching a small wooden box. Inside, gold rings, her last treasures, or bribes for the afterlife. Another was found with a key in hand, maybe to her home, maybe to a door she never reached. Historians still argue whether the people were waiting for rescue by sea or just knew there was nowhere else to go. The boats never came. The sea boiled too. You sit now at the edge of one of those boathouses. The stone still feels warm, though that's just your imagination. You can almost hear their breathless cries, the gasping silence, the walls trembling before the storm. And then nothing. No fire, no footsteps. Just stillness. It's easy to look back with detachment. Ancient death feels distant, sanitized. But this was sudden, intimate. 1 second, your neighbor speaks. The next, they're gone. Not slowly, not quietly, but violently, completely. The science says there were no survival instincts strong enough to escape this. No angle, no door, no prayer. And yet, they waited. What does that tell us? That hope doesn't leave until the last breath does. That even when the sky is splitting open, we still clutch keys. Still reach for gold. Still wait for boats that won't come. Tonight, as your limbs settle and your breath finds its rhythm, picture Herculaneum as it is now. Sunlight falling on carefully excavated ruins. The boathouses tidy with signs and placards. The bones long removed. Labeled. Studied. Stilled. But under all that glass and documentation, they're still there. The woman with the rings, the man with the key, the child who never cried, and the fire that took them, still glowing quietly in our memory. Now follow the smoke and ash to a different battlefield, one without fire, but full of steel. The air is damp, the soil churned, the grass flattened by footsteps long vanished. You're in early medieval England, somewhere between fields and blood. The year hovers around 900 CE. There's shouting, brief, angry, then silence. And then a thunk. A man falls. He doesn't drop like someone fainting. He drops like a sack of wood, split down the center, his skull cracked open cleanly, like an axe through a ripe melon. His remains will be uncovered centuries later in a mass grave near Repton, Derbyshire, what archaeologists believe was the site of a Viking winter camp. Among the hundreds of skeletons, this one stands out. His skull is sliced in two, straight through the crown, as if cleaved by a blade swung with precision. No defensive wounds on the arms, no broken ribs, no signs of a struggle. Just a single, fatal blow. Was he caught unaware? Or worse, was he kneeling? Historians still debate the context of this kill. Some say it was battle, a chaotic clash between Anglo-Saxons and Norse raiders. Others believe it was execution, ceremonial, perhaps. The clean line of the cut suggests deliberate control, not the chaos of war. Fringe theories even propose it was punishment for betrayal, a warrior judged by his own. And yet, no records, no name, just the evidence in bone. You crouch beside him now, observing the ragged edges of bone, the way the skull halves rest askew, like an open book left unread. The wound glows pale in the museum lights today, but here, in the cold damp of the field, it's raw. Personal. Nearby are more skeletons, many showing signs of trauma, slashes to the spine, punctures through the pelvis, arrowheads still lodged in ribs. It wasn't a clean fight. It was a butchery. But this man, this was something else. The axe wound tells a story of discipline, of someone taking their time. No flurry of strikes, just one. Sharp, centered, end of sentence. Vikings were known for ritual executions. The blood eagle, a method both horrifying and possibly apocryphal, remains a subject of fierce scholarly debate. Did they actually do it? Or was it just medieval propaganda? No one can say for sure. But this cut, this skull, suggests that brutal artistry wasn't just legend. And yet, there's something quiet about this death. Dignified, even. You wonder what the man thought in his last moments. Did he look his killer in the eyes? Did he kneel with honor or resist with fear? Or was he just tired? Modern forensic imaging shows the wound was delivered from slightly above. The attacker stood over him. The blade? A broad Viking axe, not built for finesse, but capable of surgical force when wielded right. Historians note that some warriors believed in choosing the manner of their death. A clean strike, a warrior's end. Perhaps this was that. But you'll never know, because all that's left is a skull, split like firewood, saying nothing. And yet, saying everything. You sit back now, letting the image fade. The blood has long dried, the mud has settled, the bones are boxed. But somewhere beneath the fields of Derbyshire, there's still a silence hanging in the air. A memory etched not in words, but in fracture lines. And tonight, as your eyes grow heavier and your thoughts slow, you remember him. Not for how he lived, not even for how he died, but for the precision, the purpose, the stillness. It only took one swing. The wind changes again. The chill lifts. You're no longer in battlefields or burnt cities, but high, very high, above sea level. The air is thin now. Your breath comes slow, heavy. Every step crunches in frozen silence. You're in the Andes Mountains, over 6,000 meters above sea level. No trees, no birds, just endless white sky, volcanic rock, and the whisper of something sacred. She's already here, nestled inside a stone burial chamber atop the Lullaillaco volcano. A girl rests, legs tucked, arms folded, eyes closed, as if simply sleeping. They call her La Doncella, the maiden. But don't let the name soften the truth. She was a child, barely 13, hair braided, lips slightly parted, and she was sacrificed. You kneel beside her now. Even after 500 years, her skin is intact. Her face still full. Her clothing, woven alpaca wool, dyed in deep reds and yellows, is untouched by time. It's not preservation, it's perfection. But this isn't peace. This is ritual. The Inca believed in capacocha, a practice where chosen children were offered to the gods, not in anger, in reverence, selected for their purity, their beauty, their symbolic connection to balance. They were fed well, clothed in finery, paraded through the empire. then marched for weeks into the sky and given to the mountain. La Doncella didn't scream, didn't struggle. Toxicology tests revealed she was given chicha, an alcoholic corn drink, and coca leaves, numbing her body and mind. She likely fell asleep and never woke up. At least that's the kind version. Historians still argue whether the children truly understood what was happening. Some claim the rituals were peaceful, even joyful. Others point to signs of anxiety, worn fingernails, signs of vomiting, a clenched jaw. La Doncella shows none of that. Her body is pristine. No bruises, no breaks. Just a soft stillness. But beside her, two younger children. One, a boy, has foam at his mouth. A sign of suffocation. Or fear. You wonder if she watched them die first. The fringe theory? That the mountain wasn't just a stage, but an executioner. Some believe the freezing was intentional, letting the child drift off into coldness, a kind of natural euthanasia. Others think they were buried alive. She wasn't murdered in haste. She was delivered. As a message. An offering. A bridge between heaven and empire. You reach toward her now, not in fear, but in reverence. Her expression is haunting. Calm. Resigned. Timeless. Today, her body rests in a museum, stored in a high-tech freezer, protected behind glass. But here, in your mind, she's still on the mountain, still surrounded by silence, still held by the very gods she was meant to please. And what a lonely afterlife it must be. Modern researchers call her one of the best preserved mummies in the world. But that term, mummy, feels wrong. She wasn't embalmed, she wasn't wrapped in cloth. She was simply left in the cold, and the cold kept her. And so she sleeps. Historians study her hair, her teeth, her stomach contents. They extract information, timelines, trade routes, political context. But the core of her story is simple. She was chosen. She walked, she drank, she slept, and she never woke up. You sit now, watching her as the wind howls outside the burial chamber. A silence stretches between you, thin as the air itself. It's not tragic. It's not beautiful. It just is. And tonight, beneath your blanket and artificial stars, remember her. Not as a symbol, not as an artifact, but as a child who left the world at 13 to become something more than human. Not everyone survives to be remembered, but some are remembered because they never truly left. The mountain air fades, and now the ground beneath you softens, wet, dark, heavy. The scent of rot and iron hangs in the air. You're standing beside a quiet bog in Iron Age Sweden, where the reeds sway gently and the water hides more than fish. Something catches your eye. A curve of bone, a splash of red-tinged peat. You step closer, and there he is. Face down, partially submerged, skull split and scalped. Not the messy tearing of an animal, but the deliberate stripping of a human hand. The skin removed from the top of the head, cleanly, ritualistically. Hair gone. Identity erased. They found him in the 1930s, one of several bodies recovered from Kerbaka Bog. But his stood out. Not because of how he died, but because of what came after. He was buried in a pit full of other skulls, all disarticulated, mixed, like a stew of the dead. Some skulls were crushed, others burned. But his? It had been peeled. Mainstream archaeologists called it an execution, a tribal punishment, maybe for betrayal. The Iron Age was no stranger to brutal justice, but fringe scholars saw something else, a ritual of control, not just killing a man, but erasing him. Skin, name, voice, face, all removed. You kneel now beside him, noticing how his arms are twisted oddly behind his back. Not natural. Tied, subdued, and near the edge of the pit. A wooden stake, scorched at the end. Was it used to stir the bones, or to mark the spot? Historians still argue whether bog bodies were offerings or outcasts. Some bear signs of reverent burial, arranged limbs, clothing, amulets. Others are dumped like garbage. This man straddles the line. His position feels intentional. But the pit? Chaotic. Was he meant to protect the land? Or to be forgotten by it? The bogs of Europe have long held these secrets. Tollund Man, Graubalm, Winderby Girl, all trapped in peat and silence, preserved not by love, but by chemistry. The acidic waters turned flesh to leather, organs shriveled but whole. Even stomach contents survive. But his scalp? Gone. That's the part that won't let you sleep. Scalping in Europe is rare. Not unheard of, but unusual. And it was done with care. No hesitation marks, no hacking. Just a precise line across the forehead and a smooth pull backward. Almost surgical. The theory goes that removing the scalp removes status, identity, even soul. A symbolic unmaking. Fringe whispers claim this man was once a leader. A priest. Perhaps he led the ritual sacrifices until it was his turn. Perhaps he broke taboo or crossed into madness. Maybe his followers turned on him and decided to feed him to the same gods he once served. We'll never know. You watch as the bog water laps quietly at his shoulder. The peat moss muffles everything. The world slows. There's no sun, just dim grey above and dark roots below. His skull now sits in storage, catalogued, studied, described as Specimen KB3. But here, in this quiet place, he still lingers. The pit is still there, overgrown, but marked. And tonight, under your blankets, as your breath settles and your thoughts stretch thin, imagine that cold peat wrapping around your arms, the weight of earth pressing against your cheek, and above you, only silence. He was stripped, yes, but he was not erased. Because now, tonight, you remember him. And that might be more than he ever expected. Now the ground beneath you dries. The peat gives way to cracked stone, sparse grass, and sun-baked earth. You've gone back farther than before, tens of thousands of years. Pleistocene Eurasia. It's not a village, not even a camp, just wilderness, wind, and teeth. You're alone, but you're being watched. Bones crunch in the distance, something low to the ground. You hear it sniffing. It moves like it owns this place. Because it does. Hyena. They weren't always scavengers. In the Ice Age, hyenas were apex predators, pack hunters, bone crushers, den masters. And tonight, they're feasting. The skeleton discovered in a cave in what is now Georgia. Human remains chewed, fractured, disarticulated. Ribs cracked open like kindling. Femur gnawed through the marrow. Skull pierced at the temple. But here's where it gets strange. The body wasn't dragged. It wasn't carried. It was left neatly arranged, as if the hyenas lost interest partway through or were interrupted. A single human body, stripped of muscle, surrounded by bite marks but no evidence of battle. Historians still argue, was this man hunted or merely cleaned up after death? Fringe archaeozoologists suggest an eerie possibility. The man died elsewhere. His body was left or carried to the cave, and the hyenas moved in. Opportunists, janitors of prehistory. But others argue the spacing of the bites, the lack of disarticulation in some joints, suggest a live attack. A chase, a cornering, a slow death beneath the weight of hungry jaws. You crouch by the remains now. The jawbone is snapped. The tibia has deep scoring lines, made not by knives, but teeth. Bone was chewed, not nibbled, not gnawed. Crushed. You imagine it, limping through a ravine, the sound of paws in the dirt, the panting breath, the moment you trip, and the hyena pack descending. Not in anger, just hunger. Modern hyenas have a bite force of over 1,000 psi, enough to snap bones like celery. But their ancestors? Larger, meaner, with skulls adapted for nothing but pressure and patience. Once they caught you, it was over, and yet your bones remained. Not scattered, not buried, just left. As if nature itself decided you weren't even worth finishing. There's something lonelier than being killed. It's being abandoned by even your killer. One theory, bold, poetic, suggests that Ice Age humans saw hyenas as both death and deity, that their dens were sacred, that being eaten wasn't shameful. It was expected. A return to the circle. But there's no ceremony here, no flowers, just a femur, cracked open like a cask. Even in death, the hyenas didn't take everything. You watch one now, trotting off with a hand in its mouth, bones still clicking together as it disappears into the dusk. And you wonder, who mourned this man? No fire was built for him, no burial mound raised. He died alone, and was forgotten until the bones told his story. We label these cases as taphonomic evidence of scavenger activity. That's the polite term. But you and I know what it means. It means that when death came, it didn't wear robes or crowns. It wore fur and drool and a crooked grin. And it came with company. Tonight, as your heartbeat slows and the room settles, try to picture that last sunset. The sky wide, the breath shallow, the sound of jaws closing over your spine. Not out of cruelty, just instinct. Because sometimes the most brutal deaths weren't orchestrated by humans. Sometimes they came on 4 legs, and they didn't even look back. The air sharpens now, not with violence, but with precision. You're kneeling in a cave, far from the open plains, surrounded by the bones of a Neolithic settlement. The floor is cool. The smell of dust and mineral fills your lungs. At your feet lies a human skull, and in the center of that skull is a hole. Clean, round, deliberate. Trepanation. This wasn't done by accident, and it wasn't fatal, at least not immediately. The edges of the hole show signs of healing, bone regrowth, scar tissue, which means the person lived, maybe days, maybe years, after someone drilled into their skull with stone tools. Take a breath. Let that sink in. Thousands of years ago, someone took another person, maybe a friend, maybe a child, and began cutting through bone with obsidian flakes or flint knives, scraping in slow, careful circles until they reached the brain. And the patient lived. Historians still argue whether trepanation was meant to release evil spirits, relieve pressure from trauma, or treat seizures. The truth is probably all three, depending on where, when, who. In the early Neolithic Balkans, where this skull was found, the technique was surprisingly advanced. The cut was shallow but precise, no signs of infection, no splintering. Someone knew what they were doing. Fringe researchers love to point out the symmetry of some trepanations. Perfectly circular, almost geometric. They whisper about proto-scientists, spiritual surgeons, or even shamanic technicians guided by dreams. But mainstream archaeologists remain cautious. After all, many of the patients didn't survive. Plenty of skulls show half-finished holes, mid-surgery, ending in death. You study this one. The person was likely male, about 35, with arthritis in his knees and worn molars from years of chewing rough grain. Not a priest, not a king, just a tired farmer with a headache that wouldn't go away. And someone said, "Let's cut it out." It's humbling. You think of how advanced we claim to be. MRIs, anesthesia, sterile gloves. And yet, this man survived Stone Age brain surgery with nothing but grit, luck, and maybe a bit of prayer. There's no record of how long he lived afterward. Maybe he got better. Maybe he spent his final days in a haze, brain swelling slowly beneath the healing wound. But he walked away. And that's something. You imagine the operation now. A dim hut, smoke rising, the shaman's hands steady, the scraping sound, not sharp, but rhythmic, like carving into bark, the scent of blood, of bone dust, the patient groaning softly, or silent, unmoving. The hole was likely covered with leather afterward, maybe decorated. In some cultures, trepanned skulls were considered special, powerful, touched. In fact, certain grave sites show individuals with trepanned skulls buried separately, reverently. Were they seen as survivors or warnings? Historians still debate whether the practice spread through knowledge or instinct. Did one tribe teach another? Or did multiple groups stumble upon the same brutal cure? And here's the strangest part. Some cultures performed multiple trepanations on the same person. Up to 4. Circular holes, healed and overlapping. Not one mistake, not one fatal cut. Just a skull full of scars. You run your fingers gently along the edge of the hole now, feeling the story it tells. A story not of death, but of trying to survive, of doing something terrifying in the hope that it might help. And maybe it did. Because this person lived long enough for the bone to grow back. And tonight, as your breath slows and your thoughts drift, that's what lingers. Not the pain, but the attempt. The fact that someone cared enough to try, to cut, to risk, to heal, all with nothing but stone and hope. From the darkness of the cave, the air grows brighter, but sharper, colder. You hear the creak of ice beneath your feet. It shifts. It groans. You're standing on the edge of a frozen lake somewhere in northern Europe, around 7,000 years ago. The Mesolithic era, when winters were long and survival was conditional. A net is tangled at your feet, handmade, twisted from plant fibers. You see something caught in it, wooden stakes, stone sinkers, a few shattered reeds. But what pulls your breath tight is what lies beneath the ice. A body, face down, arms bent awkwardly, one foot still wrapped in the fishing line. He didn't fall through, he was pulled under. This ancient fisherman's skeleton was discovered in the lake bed decades later. Limbs splayed, tools nearby, and no evidence of struggle beyond that final position. His gear was still intact, his net unfinished. Some stones were still clutched in one hand, as if he was weighting the net down when something went wrong. Historians still debate the cause. Did he slip and get trapped? Was the ice thin and deceptive? Or was there someone else? Someone who helped him fall? The bones show no blunt trauma, no slashing. But the position is strange, tucked at an angle too clean for an accident, as if he had help staying down. Fringe theorists even suggest ritual drowning, the idea that lakes held spiritual significance, and that sacrifices were made, not by force, but by resignation. But there's no clear evidence of that here. Just a man, a net, and a hole that froze over too quickly. You kneel now, watching the frozen outline beneath the surface. His face is barely visible. His hands look almost peaceful. But then you notice the detail that chills you most. His mouth is open, as if mid-breath or mid-cry. The lake, of course, didn't care. It froze again, covered him like a wound scabbed over. For thousands of years, no one knew he was there. A line under the ice, a bend in the reeds, a silence no one noticed. Until now. The tools he left behind tell you more than any scroll could. His net design was sophisticated, clearly adapted from observation. This wasn't a novice. He knew the water. He trusted it. And it betrayed him. Modern archaeologists have reconstructed the netting technique. It would have required patience. Cold fingers tying knots, weighted stones, steady feet on slippery surfaces. He was probably working alone. Maybe an early dawn. Maybe trying to feed a family we'll never name. And then something slipped. Maybe he did. The foot tangled in the net is telling. It wasn't dragged. It remained. As if he was pulled once, violently, then the ice closed behind him. No escape, just the cold. And time. Historians argue whether this is the oldest known case of drowning in situ with preserved fishing equipment. The detail is so perfect, it almost feels staged. But you know better. You're standing here now, watching the breath you'll never see leave his lungs. He didn't die in pain, or pride, just too early, too cold, too quietly. And somehow that makes it worse. We think of drowning as a dramatic thing, splashing, screaming. But this was silent, private, as if the lake had a secret to keep. And for 7 millennia, it did. Tonight, as you lie still, listen to the hush of your own breath. That rhythm, that pause. Imagine the moment he lost his footing. The crack, the cold biting his skin, the pull downward, the sudden shocking stillness as the lake shut above him. And then nothing, except the net. Still half woven, still holding. The ice fades. Now it's soil again. Warm, loose. You're somewhere in Central Europe, around 1600 BCE. A Bronze Age graveyard. rows of burials tucked beneath low mounds. But one man stands out, or rather lies wrong. He's not resting. He's been mangled. At first glance, he appears buried like the others. Arms at his side, legs extended, a shallow pit. But when archaeologists unearthed him, they noticed something strange. His face had been cut. Deliberately, repeatedly, but not hacked. Shaved, with a bronze sickle. The skin along his jawline and cheeks had been flensed away, not deep enough to decapitate, but enough to ruin the face. No sign of battle wounds, no defense marks, just tidy, sweeping cuts, curved, almost ceremonial. Imagine that, being ritually shaved to death. You're kneeling now beside his grave. The air is heavy with damp earth and the faint scent of iron. The sickle marks curve across the bone like claw scratches, clean and crescent-shaped. One across the forehead, another beneath the chin, as if someone was giving him a final shave, and never stopped. Historians still argue over this one. Some claim it was symbolic disfigurement, meant to rob him of identity in death. Others think it was humiliation, a punishment not just for crime, but for shame. A fringe theory suggests he was a prank victim, not in the modern sense, but part of a bizarre early ritual, mocking death to weaken its power. Make the dead laugh, one researcher wrote, and maybe they won't return. But this man wasn't laughing. His teeth were clenched, jaw muscles tensed at the time of death. He felt every stroke. There's no sign of restraint, no rope marks on the wrists, no broken bones from struggle. So was he drugged? Willing? Or simply overpowered? The cuts were methodical. The bronze sickles used had thin edges built for grain, yet here they were, used on skin, on face, on memory. And that's the thing. Your face is your identity. It's what people remember, what you leave behind. So cutting it away isn't just cruelty, it's erasure. You watch now as the soil shifts around him. The grave wasn't marked. There was no stone, no offering. Just a man, left to rot with his face carved into a message no one remembered how to read. But here you are, reading it. His skull was excavated in the early 2000s and stunned researchers with the cleanliness of the wounds. There was no mutilation of the body, just the face. No wounds on the chest, no sign of disease. Just a dead man with a half-peeled head, staring into eternity. Was he a traitor? A blasphemer? A jester who made one wrong joke? Historians still debate whether sickles had symbolic meaning. Life? Death? The harvest? Was this a harvest of memory? Of shame? You reach down now, brushing soil from his eye socket, half expecting it to blink, but it doesn't. He's still, finished, forgotten by all but a few. And tonight, by you. You lie in your bed, far from sickles and soil, but your mind still feels the blade. Not sharp, not fast, just patient. Slow, a final insult before eternity. The man never spoke again. But his bones did, and tonight, they speak to you. You're in Denmark now. The land is flat, the sky is grey, the peat heavy with secrets. Step carefully. This place swallows time. He's waiting for you. They found him in 1950, during peat cutting in a bog near Silkeborg. At first, they thought he was recent. His skin still leather brown, his face intact, the stubble on his chin still visible. But he was older, much older. They call him Tollund Man, and his death was not natural. You crouch beside him now. His body is curled gently, like someone asleep. His legs tucked. One hand curled loosely beside his cheek. His lips are closed, serene, and around his neck, a noose, tightly wound, still knotted, made from twisted animal gut. He wasn't hanged in anger. He was offered. Historians believe Tollund Man was a sacrifice, part of a ritual offering to the gods of the bog, perhaps for a good harvest. Safe passage? Rain. The noose wasn't designed to break his neck. It was for strangulation, a slow, conscious, deliberate death. And yet, he looks peaceful. That's what unsettles you. You expect contorted agony, a frozen scream. But Tollund Man is calm. Eyes closed, mouth gently drawn. His face still wrinkled at the brow, as if in quiet thought. Some say he looks like he's dreaming. His stomach contained his final meal. Barley porridge with flax, seeds, and traces of mistletoe pollen. Possibly sacred, possibly hallucinogenic. A ritual meal eaten before death. You wonder, did he know? Was it his choice? Was he honored? Did he feel chosen or cornered? Historians still debate the tone of the ritual. Some bog sacrifices show violence, multiple wounds, decapitations. Others, like Tollund Man, seem gently placed, even loved. Fringe theorists have long suggested he was a priest himself, giving his life to maintain the balance. But the noose says otherwise. No knife cuts, no blade, just pressure. A slow cutting off of air, of thought, of time. You lean closer. His feet are bare, his hands soft, fingernails neatly trimmed. No signs of struggle, no wounds. But the bog preserved everything, including the knot in the cord. He wasn't buried in a traditional grave. No cairn, no marker, just peat, acidic water, and silence. And yet he didn't rot. The bog tanned him, turning flesh to leather, organs to shadow. When uncovered, his skin still felt pliable, his face whole. In museums, you can stare down into the glass case where he lies today. But it's not the same. You're not here for exhibits, you're here for echoes. Because in this stillness, beneath this soft earth, he whispers something you can't quite hear. Not fear, not pain, just acceptance. His death was a transaction. Something was needed. A gift had to be made. And he was it. Historians still argue over what exactly the gods of the bog wanted. Blood, breath, suffering, or just obedience? The answer is lost, somewhere between the grain of his last meal and the way his chin still presses gently to his chest. You sit now in the soft bog grass, feeling the earth squish beneath you. Somewhere under your fingertips, more bodies lie hidden. More offerings. More secrets the peat has sealed with quiet devotion. But tonight, it's just him. The man with the noose. The man with the folded arms. The man who looks like he's sleeping. And maybe he still is. As your breathing slows and your limbs go soft, picture that moment. Kneeling by the water, the cord slipped around your neck, the world narrowing as the gods look on. And then, stillness. He never screamed. Neither will you. The bog recedes behind you, and now the world shrinks. Not to a battlefield or a temple, but to a cave. A narrow, jagged womb of stone sealed long ago by nature's hand and man's forgetfulness. You're in the Paleolithic era, perhaps 20,000 years ago, perhaps more. Dates blur in here. What matters is the stillness, the damp, and the single body curled in a shadow no sun has reached in millennia. She was a woman, young, maybe 20, but her bones are ancient, and they speak in silence. They found her in the back of the El Miron cave in Spain, buried in ochre and sealed away with purpose. But what haunts you is how she died. Her limbs were broken, not shattered in panic, broken cleanly. Her arm, her ribs, one leg. There are no tool marks, no signs of a fight. But she didn't walk into that cave. She was placed and left to die. You imagine it now. Her body, injured, unable to crawl. Food gone. Air thin. No light. No fire. The stone around her is not warm. It is not comforting. It is final. And the strangest part? She curled herself, like a child, like someone accepting something they can't escape. Historians still debate who she was. A shaman? A sacrifice? A woman abandoned by her people or honored in her isolation? The red ochre dusted over her bones suggests ritual significance. But the position, the injuries, and the location suggest something colder. Starvation. Her teeth show enamel hyperplasia, periods of early malnutrition. Her joints show repetitive stress. She wasn't pampered. She was a worker. Maybe a gatherer. Maybe a burden in the wrong season. Fringe archaeologists propose a chilling theory that she was the first known cave burial. Not because she was special, because she couldn't leave. The mouth of the cave is narrow, steep. With the injuries she bore, she wouldn't have walked far. Some believe she crawled in, hiding from danger. Others say she was dragged in, laid gently and simply, forgotten, or remembered, revered. You choose which is worse. The cave tells little. There are no carvings, no offerings, just her bones, her quiet red dust, and the hollowness of everything around her. You kneel now in that darkness, hand on the rough floor, trying to hear her breath echo through time. There's nothing, just the slow drip of water from above, and the sense that this space was never meant to be visited again. And yet here you are. She had no tools, no food, no fire pit. Her skull is tilted slightly upward, as if just before the end, she looked toward the entrance, hoping for footsteps that never came. And then, stillness. Historians still wonder what role the ochre played. It stains the bones like blood. Was it part of the farewell? A way of marking her? Sending her to the spirit world painted in sacred dust? Or was it meant to mask something, ritual or rot? We don't know. But here's what you do know. She was alone. She was hungry. And she knew no one was coming. And still, she folded herself into the stone as if it were a blanket, as if it could carry her somewhere beyond. And maybe it did. You lie still now, imagining the weight of that darkness. No voices, no footsteps, just you and stone, and time, and one last breath, so soft it didn't even echo. She rests there still, and tonight, maybe you will too. The cave fades. Now you're standing under an open sky, a field wide and wind-blown, somewhere in Neolithic Western Europe. There are no towns here, no fences, just tall grass, a scattering of stones, and a half-built megalith lying awkwardly in the dirt. You don't see him at first, but he's there, beneath the stone, trapped. His skeleton was found crushed mid-task under what should have been the keystone of a tomb, one of the great slabs meant to crown a burial chamber. But instead of honoring the dead, it created one. This wasn't a warrior, no weapons. His hands bore calluses, thickened bone, signs of a life spent hauling, cutting, lifting. His spine was curved with labor, his fingers misshapen from repetitive strain. He was a builder, and the monument killed him. Historians still argue whether it was accident or intent. Was the slab dropped? Did a rope snap? Did it roll unexpectedly in the rain? Or was he beneath it on purpose? Fringe theories point to the layout of the burial. Unusual. His body wasn't removed, not shifted. The stone was never moved off him. He was simply left there, pinned and preserved, as if the act itself was complete. A sacrifice? A warning? A builder entombed in his own blueprint? You kneel beside the stone now. Your fingers press against its cold surface. It is impossibly heavy, and yet somehow intimate. This wasn't just death by gravity. It feels ritualistic. The alignment of the stones, the careful mound of earth surrounding them, the way the body slots beneath the slab like a piece of some dark puzzle. And here's the part that lingers. There are no signs of panic in the soil, no scattered tools, no footprints of others trying to free him. Just stillness. And over time, grass grew. Rain fell. The stone settled, and he became part of the monument. Archaeologists dated the event to around 3500 BCE, and his bones tell a harsh story. Crushed ribs, shattered pelvis. His skull remained intact, tilted sideways as if watching the stone descend. Was he given something? A final drink? Words? Or was he simply unlucky? Some cultures of the time believed in foundational sacrifice, the idea that to ensure a structure's endurance, a life must be offered. We see traces of this in folklore across continents, bodies under bridges, under thresholds, under walls, blood for strength, flesh for permanence. Did his people believe this, or did they just walk away? Mainstream scholars lean toward accident. But you can't ignore the quiet symmetry, the way his body fit, the way the tomb, unfinished, became a tomb for the wrong person. You imagine the moment. A team pulling on ropes, a final push, a foot slip, a cry, a thud, and then silence. Did they scream? Did they freeze? Did they tell anyone? Or did they fill the rest of the mound and say nothing? You lie now beside the stone, imagining its weight. Not just physical, but historical. This man's body didn't become a name. It became part of the land. And as the centuries passed, the tomb stood, unvisited, unmarked, until someone, long after, found a toe bone sticking out of the soil and dug. What they found was not a hero, not a king, just a man, crushed by what he tried unbound to raise. And maybe that's all of us in the end. Tonight, as your breath slows and your body sinks deeper into the mattress, picture the stone, heavy, cold, unmoved. He's still there, and so is his monument, still standing, because of him, or in spite of him. The stones fall away. Now you stand in a dry, wind-swept expanse, somewhere between Syria and the edge of time. The sun burns low. The ground is brittle, cracked. The world is quiet, but the silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels unstable, like something terrible happened here, and no one ever came back. A single skull lies in the dirt. At first glance, it looks ordinary, a little scorched, a little fractured. But then you notice the inside. It's melted, not shattered by heat, not scorched black like in Herculaneum. The bone inside the cranium is glassy, shiny, like someone boiled the brain until it became molten. The outer skull, mostly intact, but the interior, burned from within. Historians still debate what could cause such a thing. This skull, unearthed in the prehistoric site of Tel Brak, is one of the strangest found in the Fertile Crescent. And that's saying something. Tel Brak was a crossroads of early civilization. Temples, trade, warlords, wheat. But this skull doesn't fit. It doesn't belong to a buried body. It was found alone, on a ritual platform. No grave goods, no context. Just the melted head. Some say it was ritual burning, that the person's head was set alight as part of a sacrifice. But the fire didn't consume the flesh. It was too controlled, too precise. There's no evidence of open flame on the outside. The heat came from inside. Fringe theories, of course, bloom like weeds. Lightning strike? Spontaneous combustion? Some even whisper of early chemical experiments. But there's no evidence of residue, no accelerants, just heat. Intense. Focused. Impossible. You kneel beside it now, staring into the blackened dome. The bone around the eye sockets is warped. You can almost feel the scream that never made it out. A flash. Then silence. The truth is, we don't know how this person died. The skull is dated to around 3500 BCE, a time of urban chaos, early kings, early wars, and early secrets. Tel Brak was collapsing then, plagued by violence, famine, and internal unrest. Was this skull a warning? A punishment? A relic? Mainstream archaeologists admit they're baffled. There's nothing like it anywhere else. One melted skull, no context, no explanation. Just one silent scream, frozen in bone. And here's the eerie part. Nearby, within the same layer of ash, they found fragments of glass. Not man-made, fulgurite. Sand turned to glass by lightning. Could the person have been struck? It's possible, but unlikely. Lightning rarely leaves that kind of trace, and never melts the inside of a skull without destroying the outside. You sit beside it now, watching the desert wind sweep across the platform. Time has stripped everything away. No temple, no priest, just the skull, just the mystery. And perhaps that's the point. Sometimes death isn't a message, or a lesson. Sometimes it's just a question left hanging in the sand. Who was this person? Why were they here? What burned them from the inside? And why did no one bury them? Tonight, as you lie in the safety of your bed, let that silence settle. Let that unanswered question curl gently into your dreams. Because some mysteries survive not because they're unsolved, but because they can't be. You're lying still now. The stories have passed like shadows, glimpses of lives lived and lost in ways almost too strange to believe. Bones gnawed by beasts, skulls carved like stone, fires that boil the blood, waters that hush the last breath, and stones that fall faster than prayers. And yet, through all of it, one thing remains. Survival, not of the body, but of the story. Every broken femur, every hollow socket, every ancient fingerprint pressed into damp earth still whispers something. Pain, courage, mystery, memory. They speak in languages long forgotten, through rituals no longer understood. But you heard them tonight, and now you're part of that quiet. Let your breath slow. Let the tension fall from your hands, your jaw, your chest. You're safe here. You're warm. No hyenas, no bogs, no flames. Just the soft pull of rest, the steady rhythm of breath, and the distant echo of ancient voices fading into silence. You're not meant to solve everything, only to listen. Let that last image fade, a melted skull in a desert no one remembers, a puzzle with no key, a question with no fear. And now, let the darkness deepen around you, not with dread, but with calm. Because the dead are quiet now, and so are you. Sleep well.